Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of News You Can Use. I'm your host, Brandon Domise, and there is a lot to get into. I mean, the tea is hot today, including, is Canadian mainstream media biased in its coverage of Israel and Palestine? Oh yeah, plus NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh is apologizing for breaking COVID-19 rules, but the question is, should he be? And then Toronto artist Mustafa the Poet goes international. That's our good news, but before we even get to that, let's get to the homework. And that means subscribing to this channel right now. Click that button, hit that notification bell, and make sure to follow us on all of our social media. Okay, let's get back to our top story because Canadian media, mainstream media, they're in hot water right now. All international media outlets, a lot of them are talking about the coverage that Canadian media has when it comes to Israel and Palestine. In fact, there was an open letter that was signed by more than 2,000 people calling for better and fair coverage. Eva, we've been talking a lot about this because this is making waves across the world. What else is in this letter?
Now, they're not asking for them to pick a side. They're just asking for it to be an open conversation and cover both sides. We don't want it to be a one-side story.
So we know that Canada's public broadcaster, CBC, they're kind of in hot water right now with a bit of scandal.
Two journalists who signed the letter have actually been invited in and asked that they were barred for signing the letter. They were being barred for it, basically saying that, you know, you shouldn't be part of this conversation at all because you picked a side. And also the executive director of CBC has said that try to use better language, and by that, do not use the word Palestine at all.
An executive producer there, yeah.
Executive producer.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And so, you know what? Why don't we talk to someone who actually signed that letter? Andray Domise, contributing editor at Maclean's. Thanks so much for joining us here on News You Can Use.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I want to get right into it. This letter that was signed by more than 2,000 journalists here in Canada. I mean, you're one of those people who signed this letter. Why did you choose to do that?
Well, at the point where the letter was circulated, and it was circulated by Canadian journalists, there was fairly slanted coverage of what was happening in Israel and Palestine, what was happening in Gaza. There was almost no mention of Sheikh Jarrah, the neighborhood in East Jerusalem where Palestinian people were being evicted. There was no mention of the invasion by the IDF of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that skunk water, which is a horrible and noxious substance, was sprayed on people inside the mosque and outside of it, that stun grenades were used. None of that had entered the news. What we were told was that Hamas began firing rockets into Israel, and that Israel was responding with bombardment. And after having seen this cycle play itself out over the course of decades, some journalists got together and wrote a letter asking for fairer and more nuanced coverage. And when the letter was put in front of me, it didn't take me very long to decide that I needed to sign the letter as well.
We're hearing that some journalists have had their work impacted since signing this letter. Has that happened to you?
No. I mean, given that I'm a columnist, I'm not a reporter, I have fairly wide latitude to voice my opinions. But there have been multiple other journalists, especially reporters, who've talked about being brought in for one-on-one meetings that have had conversations with their management. People have gotten in contact with the authors of the letter because they've been pressured by management to take their names off the letter. And at least one journalist was told that they would not be allowed to report, at least for an indefinite time period, who knows when, but they would not be allowed to report on anything to do with Israel and Palestine.
Why do you think journalists in Canada in particular are dealing with this, I guess, kind of retribution when they're just calling for fairer coverage?
The narrative has almost always been that there's no daylight between Canada and Israel, and that the point of view that's represented in Canadian mass media oftentimes comports with whatever narrative the Israeli government wishes to produce. And it's only recently that we're beginning to get some pushback on that.
So would you say Canada's mainstream media is biased when it comes to reporting and media coverage of what happens in the Middle East?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not, I mean, it's not even a question. In Palestine, which there is a broad left-wing coalition of Palestinians that do want a secular sort of a social democratic state, well, we're dumping all of our energy, resources, and press into suppressing those stories and making it seem as a very black and white conflict, that this is a, centuries or perhaps even multi-millennia old religious conflict that is very complicated and that we can't talk about.
So how can media, Canadian mainstream media, do better on this then? Or is it even possible?
I can't even tell you. Yeah, it's going to be up to journalists, especially ones with large platforms, to start pushing back against some of this narrative, to start asking, I think, fair and basic questions that you would ask of just about any representative of any state. I think if it took journalists having tough conversations with management, and some of them even having to make career sacrifices for it, I think that there has been a beneficial result out of it. And that's that I feel like news agencies are feeling that pressure to start offering fairer and more nuanced coverage.
Andray Domise, thank you for joining us. And I gotta say, our hearts go out to all families who've lost loved ones in this just tragic situation.
Thank you for having me.
So he definitely had some strong words there, eh?
For sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Listen, I wanna hear what you guys are thinking at home about this. Do you think Canadian media is biased in its coverage? Does it need to do a better job? Mainstream media, not independent like us. We're talking mainstream. Let us know in the comment section right now. All right, let's talk about NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, because my gosh, my guy's making headlines all over the place and apologizing. So listen to this. A video recently surfaced of him breaking COVID-19 rules because he was unmasked and then he was hugging an individual. What am I talking about? Take a look at the video first. So that individual, his name is Taranveer Dalawal, but he actually knows Jagmeet. Why does he know him, Eva?
He's the executive assistant to Jagmeet's brother, who is an MPP. Yeah. So he's already kind of in the same bubble as him, and that's why a lot of people are like, it's not that big of a deal. We actually took a poll on our Instagram asking people if, he should have apologized, and more than 70% of our followers said, no, he didn't really need to apologize.
Wow, so the majority of people are saying that there was no need for him to do this.
There's no need for him to apologize. And I also checked, and both of them have gotten their first dose of vaccine, so does that mean we still have to wait to hug people after a vaccine? I don't know. It's
such an interesting question because there are still a lot of people out there who are abiding by these rules, but what happens when you do see a federal party leader who wants to be Canada's next prime minister break those rules?
But then we also saw Andrew Scheer a couple months ago at the airport without a mask, so it's not the first time.
Look at Eva pulling out the receipts. Don't apologize. We love a good fact check. Listen, we want to hear what you guys think about this story right now. Drop it in the comment section ASAP. All right, if you are an environmentalist, which I know so many people are, big news. Did you know a Netherlands court has ordered one of the world's biggest oil companies, Royal Dutch Shell, Shell where you'll get your gas, basically to cut their CO2 emissions drastically. How big are we talking? We're talking a 45% cut by the year 2030 from 2019 levels. And you're probably wondering, why is this news? Let me tell you why. Because this is the first time a court has ordered a company to basically reduce their emissions in line with global climate change standards. So big day for the environment.
And it's May 28th and it's snowing outside, so we definitely needed this.
Yeah. You happy about this, by the way, at home? If you are, let us know. If you aren't, still subscribe. Okay, let's talk about some good news. Who here listens to Mustafa the Poet? Okay, I was hoping everybody, yeah. That's all good. That's all
Me,
good.
I do.
Well, we got to shout him out. He's from Regent Park, and he recently made his TV debut on Jimmy Fallon last night. Take a look at this.
We forgot to talk about heaven. Nothing sacred.
Oh. I'm in my feels.
So good.
I'm in my feels. Kelly, you in your feels?
Every day, every news you can use.
Happy girl, no tears. Happy girl, no tears.
I know my legends that I can't.
So if you're wondering what song that song is called What About Heaven, and it comes off of his new project called When Smoke Rises. And we want to big up Mustafa and big up all Toronto artists, Canadian artists that are doing amazing things. Hey guys, that's the end of News You Can Use for today.
And it's a Friday.
And it's a Friday. Thank goodness. Listen, if you have any news stories you want us to look into, hit us up, email us, news@BrandonGomezShow.com. A reminder, News You Can Use drops every Tuesday and Fridays. And this upcoming episode of The BG Show, which drops on Sunday, is all about wellness. How are you doing mentally? Has anybody asked you that? We're going to ask you come this Sunday. Don't forget that episode. It drops at 6. Anyways, we'll see you same place, same time throughout the week.
Bye.